Here are some tips to keep With the passage of the New York State budget on April 1, 2019, legislation was enacted granting OCFS the authority to implement federal requirements mandated in the Child Care Development Block Grant of 2014. This will affect background clearances, training, and inspections. Implementation of these new requirements will begin in September of 2019. Please check the OCFS website regularly for updates. Last December, OCFS launched FAMS, the Facility Application and Management System, in an effort to streamline and enhance the licensing process. FAMS is currently available only to daycare center and school-age childcare programs. The next enhancement slated for FAMS will allow daycare center and school-age childcare programs to manage and maintain their electronic case file. OCFS anticipates this to be rolled out in the coming months. Home-based programs will be scheduled for development in FAMS after that time. All daycare center and school-age childcare programs that have provided their email address to OCFS have been emailed a link to create a FAMS account through the my.ny.gov website. You can also link your FAMS account to any current my.ny.gov account that you use for your OCFS business. If you missed the email invitation, don't worry. An email is sent out every 15 days to those not already using the FAMS system. Please note, as of January 1, 2019, all OCFS-approved plans of study must be uploaded into FAMS for tracking and management purposes. In addition to the FAMS requirement, plans of study may be voluntarily added to your Aspire account to document your training and professional development. If you need help using FAMS, please reach out to your regulator or email the address on your screen. In April 2019, several rocking sleepers were recalled due to reports of death when infants roll over in the products. All models of the Fisher-Price Rock and Play and all models of the Kids 2 rocking sleepers have been recalled. If you have one of these rocking sleepers in your program, stop using it immediately. The Commission also received approximately 200 reports of wheel failures on the Britax Bob jogging stroller that resulted in injuries to parents and children. The product remains on the market. The company offered replacement parts and produced a safety video to assist consumers. More information on these and other recalls can be found on the Consumer Product Safety Commission's website. The New York State Department of Health currently receives funding from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to implement evidence-based strategies at state and local levels to improve nutrition and physical activity. This funding is called the State Physical Activity and Nutrition Program, or SPAN. SPAN funding was awarded to 16 grantees across the United States, including the New York State Department of Health. SPAN includes a special focus on implementing and embedding physical activity and nutrition best practices into early care and education. The New York State Department of Health is achieving this in part by creating a statewide network of SPAN master trainers who provide training and technical assistance on physical activity and nutrition best practices directly to child care programs. If you are interested in learning more about these opportunities and want to connect with a SPAN master trainer in your area, please contact Kate Rose Bobsine. Early childhood administrators, staff, and parents have the opportunity to be involved in the first ever full needs assessment of the Birth to 5 system in New York. Child care employees and parents with children birth to 5 years old have the opportunity to participate. The parent, teacher, and administrator focus groups will be happening all across the state this summer. If you have any questions, want to participate, or are interested in scheduling a focus group at your location, please contact the Council on Children and Families. Thank you for all you do for the children and families enrolled in your program.
Hello, I'm Tracy Turner, Director of Regional Operations in the Division of Child Care Services. Your number one priority is the safety and well-being of children in your care. That's why it's important to assess all areas of your program on a regular basis. This includes practicing and revising your emergency plan, conducting routine safety checks of both indoor and outdoor spaces, and focusing on safety fundamentals with children and staff. During this webcast, we'll discuss how to keep children safe in your program year-round. We'll offer tips on establishing and maintaining safe environments and practices and teaching children about safety. We'll also give examples for communicating effectively with families and discuss how to maintain the required records. Throughout this training, we'll recommend safe ways to manage your daily operation and suggest new safety procedures that will enhance your program. The New York State Office of Children and Family Services appreciates your efforts to help protect and support the safety and well-being of children in your care.
Hello, and welcome to the New York State Office of Children and Family Services training, Safety Throughout the Year. I'm Christine Priest. Before we dive into tonight's training, we want to share some important updates. First, an infant formula sold in Walmart stores has recently been recalled due to possible metal contamination. The maker of Parents' Choice Advantage Infant Formula Milk-Based Powder with Iron has voluntarily recalled this product. Stop using this product immediately and contact Walmart for a refund. Please be on the lookout for this product at your program and let families know about this recall as well. More information on this and other product recalls can be found on the U.S. Food and Drug Administration website at the address on your screen. Also, you've recently received guidance from the OCFS Division of Child Care Services on a new law which eliminates the non-medical vaccination exemption for children in your program. Let's watch this clip for more information.
A new law signed in June of 2019 has removed non-medical exemptions from vaccination requirements for children in school or child care programs. This means there is no longer a religious exemption to the requirement that children be vaccinated against measles and other diseases to attend either public, private, or parochial school for students in pre-kindergarten through 12th grade or child care programs. This is meant to protect public health after the worst measles outbreak New York has seen in over 20 years. For child care providers, this means all children in your program must now be vaccinated unless they have a specific medical exemption. Any unvaccinated children currently enrolled in your program were required to receive the first age-appropriate dose in each immunization series by June 28, 2019, in order to remain enrolled. Unvaccinated children entering a new program have 14 days from the date of their enrollment in which to receive their first age-appropriate vaccine doses. The law also requires parents to show that all required follow-up doses have been scheduled as well. The deadlines for these follow-up doses depend on the vaccine. The New York State Department of Health follows the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices catch-up immunization schedule. This means that for unvaccinated children currently enrolled, caregivers must have appointments for follow-up doses scheduled by July 14, 2019. For unvaccinated children who are not yet enrolled, the first age-appropriate doses are given within 14 days from the first day of enrollment. All required follow-up doses for these children must then be scheduled within 30 days. Please note, there is no option for caregivers to appeal this requirement in childcare programs. Only a valid medical exemption will suffice, and it must be reissued annually by a New York State licensed physician. Because of this change, OCFS has updated the Child and Care Medical Statement, LDSS 4433, to remove the religious exemption language. Moving forward, all programs should utilize this form. Programs are not required to obtain new medical statements for children currently enrolled until the child is scheduled to see the doctor, such as for an annual physical or immunization visit. OCFS reviews vaccination records for compliance, and the Department of Health surveys childcare programs annually to review immunization coverage and exemption rates. Any program found not to be in compliance will be subject to sanctions from OCFS and possible civil penalties. For more information, please visit the OCFS website or contact your child care regulator.
Children rely on you to keep them healthy and safe as they explore the world around them. That's why it's so important to examine your program's overall safety and security and put plans and procedures in place so you can respond effectively to any situation that might arise. By the end of this training, you'll be able to outline components of a safe childcare program, describe safety routines to be conducted seasonally and throughout the year, recognize and address animal safety concerns, and identify environmental hazards and understand how to address them. If you have questions throughout the training, be sure to call, fax, or email us at the information on your screen. Let's meet our panelists, Tina Cook and Heather Sweet. Tina is the Division of Child Care Services Regional Office Manager for the Syracuse Regional Office. She manages an office of 34 staff who have oversight of child daycare providers in the 14 counties of central New York. Prior to coming to the Syracuse Regional Office, Tina was a supervisor in child welfare and community services. In addition, Tina was a child care regulator for 12 years in Rochester. Heather is the Director of Curriculum and Education for the Capital District Child Care Council. She's been a trainer for 13 years and a playground safety inspector for 11 years. She's also worked in Early Head Start and a private licensed child care program. Welcome to you both. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Some components of a SAFE program include knowing, using, and revising your emergency plan, communicating effectively with parents, and performing and documenting regular health and safety checks. The emergency plan is part of your program's overall healthcare plan. It's required by regulation for all child care programs and is your guide for how to safely address situations whenever and wherever they might occur. Let's go to this video to learn more about planning for emergencies.
Before you find yourself in an emergency situation, planning and preparation are essential. It's crucial to have a plan in place that includes an arrangement so all caregivers understand and can take necessary action in case of an emergency. Depending on your program's modality of care, this decision might be up to you or someone else. Whoever's responsible for developing the plan, it's important everyone knows what the expectations are and what needs to be done in those circumstances.
Hi, Roger.
Hey John, how are you?
Maintain a first aid kit. Inspect the kit each month. Replenish supplies you've used and keep a record of your monthly inspections of the kit. Each child's registration form contains emergency contact information. Always have this information readily available. Post emergency telephone numbers and a copy of your emergency procedures next to each telephone for quick reference. In an emergency, it can be difficult to remember details. Have information like directions to the program clearly written out to save valuable time. Have the program's specific house or building number easily visible so helpers can find you in a hurry.
Okay, so we heard a little about the emergency plan. Why is it so important to review your emergency plan periodically, Tina?
Well, it's important to review the emergency plan because, as we know, emergencies happen
unscheduled. And so it's important that each person in your program knows what to do when there is an emergency. It's important that they know what your expectations are and how to keep children safe during an emergency.
How frequently should we review that plan?
I would suggest that people review them at least twice a year.
Okay.
So that they know and that they make all persons in their program aware of any changes that they do make, as well as the office.
Yep. And I'm guessing if there's a big change in your program, the layout of the space or something, Heather, you would want to...
Yeah, that would be really important. If there's any changes to your program or even changes with children that are coming into your program, you're going to really want to make sure that you've reviewed that plan to make sure that all know, the children as well.
Great. It's important for everyone, staff, families, and children, to understand your program's emergency plan and their role in it. So tell me, what is meant by including the children in the emergency plan? How can we do that?
Well, we know that when we do evacuation drills, that children are a part of that. So as we teach children how to evacuate out of the homes, out of the daycare centers, we want to make sure that they're involved. So you practice so that they can know what they're supposed to do and there's no surprises.
Yep, great idea. Lining up, exiting, they need to know all those important facts.
Yes. I think it's important too because children, we don't know how parents evacuate at home, so they need to know the difference between how to evacuate in their own homes as well as when they're in the daycare setting.
Yep, that's great. Now, open and effective communication with families is also vital for safety. Share policies and procedures in writing with them on how you address challenging behaviors, payment, inclement weather, and other issues, so everyone's on the same page about what to do or expect when the time comes. Why is communication so vital for safety?
You know, like you were saying, that families may have practices at home that we're not aware of. So to kind of understand what their practices are at home and then partner with them what practices are like in the program, that's a really good way to communicate with them about safety because you are in partnership for keeping their children safe.
Yeah, and I imagine parents knowing what to expect if there is an emergency is important.
Yes, because when there's an emergency, parents want to know where their children are and how you're keeping them safe.
What are some forms that the programs need to file to help with that communication?
Well, we have the evacuation plan itself that you can share with the parents. Also, providers can have a newsletter that they send home, give parents information. They can do all of that to help parents be aware of what's happening in the program and any changes that they make.
That's great. I imagine blue cards also help with this?
Yes, it does, immensely.
And what about written permission for medications, different things like that? What other things might we need?
So the special care needs plan that they would have to do in partnership with the family to know what to do with that child with their medical needs or their individual special needs that they might have to would be something that you would want to make sure that you have on file as well.
Great. We recently had the opportunity to speak with some of you about communicating with families. Let's take a listen.
When I'm communicating with families, I always try to greet them when they're coming in or when they're picking up their child. Make sure that I have a little something to tell them about their child's day.
We have a bulletin board up in our room. It has their schedules on there. It has their feeding schedules and play schedules.
We have a daily sheet they fill out every single day, so the parents will let us know if there's anything wrong with them, if they had medication that morning, when the last time they eat, diaper change, all that kind of stuff, and then I fill it out on my end.
We have lesson plan going inside in a cubby on a Friday each week.
We also have a book where they write what the infant has tried, because all of our infants are 6 weeks to 18 months, so they could be trying new foods, so I can refer back to that book too.
Teacher parents conference, like 1 or twice in a year. And after we have open houses.
We have daily highlights up on our parent board, and we also do weekly newsletters to inform the parents what we have done throughout the week and maybe something exciting their child did.
I call the parents and I make sure that they know, especially when I don't see them at the end of the day.
I try to make sure I talk to every parent as often as possible. If that's not possible, I tend to put notes in their cubbies about important things or something we need from them.
Some of the challenges that we face, I would say, is if a certain teacher that's not normally in the classroom opens up the room, then sometimes we have miscommunication.
I think the toughest is that parents like to under-exaggerate things instead of over-exaggerate with us.
Notes don't always work. Even sometimes it's phone tag. You have to call them, they call you, and it doesn't always work out.
We learned like a sandwiching technique. So, oh, your kid had a great day, but he did this, this, and this. Oh, but he also did this really well. So that's a really good way to create a rapport.
Not being able to see them all the time, especially if they have early drop-offs and you come in a little later or vice versa.
Sometimes it's difficult for the parents to understand that the kid is ready for something different, to move on.
The parents don't speak English. I've tried to use some translating apps so that I can make notes available to them. I have also asked other parents that may speak the same language if they could help me relate messages back and forth to them.
All programs can find ways to communicate with parents by thinking outside the box and finding what works best for them. So what are some suggestions for communicating with busy families? I know you mentioned newsletters.
Yes, emailing parents, texting, anything that can get the information to the parents quickly and using what they use.
Yep.
And so if they're parents that use cell phones and use email, you want to do that. You want to get the information to them that way so that you know that they're going to read it.
Yep, that sounds perfect. Anything to
I was
add?
going to say there's some programs that have, tablets or an app that they communicate through so they can have regular communication with parents. But definitely the families, we need to figure out what's the best communication for them because newsletters may work for some, whereas an app on their phone is much more successful to get the parent communication with.
Yeah, it sounds like you have to match styles and make something that works for everybody. Great. Another key component of a safe childcare program is performing and documenting all the required daily and monthly checks. These help you keep your indoor and outdoor spaces safe and stay aware of any changing health needs of children in your care. Here's more from some of you about the checks that you perform.
I check equipment every day, make sure that there's no sharp edges, nothing's broken, everything that they're playing with is safe to use.
I make sure that all of my kids have diapers and wipes and everything is labeled, their bottles are labeled.
Just getting them over and making sure that everything is going well with them.
With infants, it's also, we do a lot of fine motor and gross motor checks too. So if my kid is picking up something with pinching for the first time, that's something that we check every day.
We prepare, for example, bleach bottles every morning. It has to be with fresh water.
Our food is in the refrigerator and that my milk is still good.
Make sure nothing that the kids could possibly choke on or on the floors.
We have our attendance, what we have checked daily, and after our food log, whereas we have to mark breakfast, lunch.
Making sure they have weather-appropriate clothing and proper footwear is a big important one this time of year.
I just make sure that all of my surfaces are cleaned every single day.
I check the children to see if they're healthy, make sure that there's no signs of abuse.
I check to make sure the classroom is tidy and there's not things on the floor that anyone can trip on or step on or hurt themselves with.
Some of the checks I do on a monthly basis would be to check our first aid kit, make sure we have everything we need.
Make sure sunscreen is not expired. Medications that children have are not expired.
Usually monthly, one really big cleanup of the classroom.
We hand in our health checks every month.
We do monthly fire drills to make sure that sound one is working and two, children are aware that this may happen and also that teachers are aware of the evacuation route.
I check our emergency bag, make sure the flashlights, batteries are still working, our water isn't outdated, and that we have some books in case we ever did need to leave. We have something to do with the kids.
One critical check you perform that must be done on every child in your program is the daily health check. This is done while the child is awake and must be documented on the child care attendance form, which is LDSS 4443, or another daily health check log or form that's been approved by OCFS. Let's watch this next clip for tips on completing the daily health check.
The daily health check is a simple routine to perform each morning as the children you care for arrive. Its purpose is not to medically diagnose, but to identify ill children as soon as possible. Performing daily health checks can reduce the spread of infection between the children and protect you and your staff. That's why it's such an important requirement for daycare providers. You'll want to greet the child and parent as they arrive. This is your chance to assess the child's condition while the parent is still on hand to provide information you might need. Be sure to get down to the child's level so you can interact with the child when talking to the parent. First, consider the child's behavior as you greet them. Is their behavior typical or atypical for the time of day and circumstances? Next, consider the child's appearance. Feel the child's skin by touching them affectionately. Note if their skin is pale, flushed, or if they have a rash. Look at their eyes, nose, and mouth. Are they dry? Is there discharge? Is the child rubbing these areas? Check their hair and observe their breathing. Is it normal or different? Do they have a cough? Ask the parent questions. How is the child feeling? Did the child sleep normally? Are they eating and drinking regularly? And when was the last time the child ate or drank? Were there any unusual events? What about the child's bowels and urine? Are they normal? And when was the last time the child used a toilet or was changed? Often you can learn some things about a child's health just by her general appearance. If you notice problems or indications of illness, discuss them with the parent immediately. Consider if there is any evidence of illness or injury since the child was last participating in childcare. Are there any indications of suspected child abuse or maltreatment? Be sure to document that the daily health check was completed. OCFS 4443 daily attendance form may be used to meet this requirement. Any signs of illness, communicable disease, injury, and/or suspected abuse or maltreatment found must be documented and kept on file for each child. A daily health check is an easy way to prevent sickness from spreading to other children, to you and your staff, and to your own family. And if a child is ill, early detection will help lead to an early recovery. In the end, a daily health check is a good idea for everyone.
Okay, so let's talk about what should you do if you notice something during a daily health check?
Well, the first thing I always talk to providers about doing is it's important to have that daily health check started when the parents are there. So if you notice something, you ask them, so if Jameson came in with a bruise that he didn't have the day before, say, oh no, what happened last night? And the parents can let you know what happened. And of course, if it doesn't fit, then that's when you would suspect, and that would be the next step. After the daily
And
health
if
check.
you did suspect if the child needed medical attention, what should you do in that situation?
If it was something that was severe, obviously you'd call 911, or you would do your own first aid. You would have your own first aid and CPR training that you would give them the first aid treatment that they may need.
You brought me right to my next question. In the event medical attention is needed and the provider calls 911, what follow-up needs to be done with OCFS?
So then if you have to call 911, you should be also make a call to OCFS, to your licensor. If your licensor isn't there, you want to speak to someone in the office and let them know that you had to call 911.
Okay. And what about the SCR? Might that?
If there's a reason to suspect, then you would also call the SCR.
The statewide central register.
Correct.
And report any suspicion of abuse or neglect. Great, thank you. Now we know that maintaining constant, careful supervision is important. This includes checking for things children may have brought with them or carried inside after outdoor time, or any hazards that might appear during the day. So what is meant by supervision, and why is that so important?
This is a big one right now.
Supervision is having direct, competent supervision. Your eyes on children, you're near children, you can see them directly at all times.
So it's not just being right there, but being aware of what's
Being
going
aware,
on.
knowing the children in your program, knowing where they are, knowing what they're doing.
Now what should we do if we notice anything that we feel might be a hazard?
We should remove it as fast, as soon as we can, or correct it as soon as we can. Obviously keep the children away from the danger, but to keep them safe.
Now, if it's an emergency, if we have to get out of there because there's a real danger, what should we do in that case?
You should follow your emergency evacuation procedure.
Great, exactly what I was looking for. Now, what if we notice a suspicious or unknown substance in our programming area?
Well, you want to block off the area so no one has access to it. Definitely you want to make sure that you're not having your staff touch and access that material. Call 911 and see if the police will come and attend to whatever that is. And you want to make sure that you get the children out of that area. You may need to do a shelter in place, move to a different area of the center, move out of that room, or go to your secondary evacuation place.
Great. Now, what if you didn't get there in time and somebody's touched that substance? What do you do in that case?
Right. Well, you want to call. You may need to call 911 because, again, we don't know what it is. So you definitely want to call 911 and have medical attention.
Yep. And maybe wash your hands, soap and
Yes.
water in the meantime, just to keep everything clear and make sure that the children are safe. Great. Thank you. Part of keeping children safe is making sure supplies are ready to go when needed. First aid kits and emergency backpacks, or GO kits, need to be checked every month. Read the expiration dates on all products and replace any necessary items. You also need to document these checks as required by regulation. The following items are required for licensed and registered programs per the health care plan form: disposable gloves, preferably vinyl, sterile gauze pads of various sizes, bandage tape, roller gauze, and a cold pack. Other items may be required according to your program's specific healthcare plan. Be sure to know what it says in your healthcare plan and to follow it. So what are some other things you might add to those first aid kits or go bags?
That's a really good question. I know that when I was working for Early Head Start, when we would do evacuations, it was in a high school, so we had sometimes impromptu evacuations that, we would have to go to our second location. And I remember this one time that we went to our second location, and one of the things that we didn't think about putting in our go bag was formula for the infants. And so we got there, and I was very thankful that another support staff was able to go get it. But you want to think about, if you can't go back into the building, what might be some basic things that you would need in your go bag in case you can't return.
Yep, great. Do you have anything to add?
No, I just want to, would add that we don't know how long you're going to be there. So although you may evacuate and you have snacks for a little while, you may be there for hours. So you also want to make sure that you have food so that you can feed the children. Because again, you don't know really how long you might have to be at your secondary location.
Yeah, so plan ahead.
Plan ahead.
Yep. Also, I would think you'd need to know the children specifically in your care if you need an EpiPen or different specific needs for those individuals.
Yes, that's true.
Great. Okay, now it's time for an activity session. Using page 2 of your participant materials, take the next couple of minutes to think about new ways or ideas you've learned to communicate with families, with other staff, and with children. If time allows, review the daily health and safety checklist on page 5 in your handouts to see how many of these safety tasks are done daily at your program. We'll see you in a few minutes. Welcome back. We're now going to talk about safety issues and creative ideas to address them during each season. We've included a seasonal safety chart in your participant materials. It lists tasks for each season so you can mark them off, and both families and staff will know they've been completed. Let's get started with the springtime safety routines.
Now it's springtime.
It's springtime now.
It's springtime now.
I like spring.
It's spring, it's spring, it's
I
spring.
like spring because the leaves come out of the trees.
I love spring because I get to play all my favorite sports. I get to play lacrosse. I get to play soccer. I get to play.
I like spring because we get to go on the playground at school.
I like it when lacrosse starts.
And leaves start growing on the tree.
I get to plant all my plants.
Flowers come out.
And I get to go look at the flowers. I see flowers bud.
Everything gets green.
I love spring.
Me?
Yep, water up. Right. Children get very excited for springtime and spending more time outdoors. We asked some of you what you think when it comes to safety in spring.
Spring safety concerns, I think I'm just concerned about insects.
So we just make sure they're not getting bit by anything.
And a tick, of course. It's May, June, it's a season for ticks.
I want to be aware if any of my students are allergic to bees.
Poison ivy. Everybody knows in our class about poison ivy.
In the spring, our biggest safety concerns are definitely the weather. We want to be dressed appropriately for the weather.
Okay, so when we think about spring, what are some things we should be thinking of?
You know, for me, I always think of that we, change the clocks. So I don't know, ever since I remember being little, I remember my parents even telling me we change the batteries in the smoke detectors and making sure that we're doing that. So that always comes to mind as one of the first things to do at springtime is to check those batteries and making sure that they're functioning.
Tina, do you have anything to add?
Well, I think also when you think about spring, you think about spring cleaning. And you think about that's a good time to take out your equipment, clean it, look at it, see if it's still appropriate, see if there's anything that needs to be fixed or thrown out. So you want to just think of spring cleaning inside of your home, inside of your centers.
Yep, great. And I'm thinking the air conditioning system's going to be on soon, so we want to get that checked and make sure that's all maintained well. The outside area, make sure everything's maintained there as well.
Yeah.
Great. Now, as of 2019, New York State requires that all smoke detectors sold should be either a 10-year sealed, non-removable battery or a hardwired detector. Spring is a good time to review policies and procedures and to reach out to parents to exchange information. So what should we look for in terms of best practice during the spring?
Well, best practice, when you're thinking about the spring, you're thinking about children are going to be outside more. So you want to make sure that your outside area is safe, your playgrounds are safe, your equipment outside. You want to make sure as you go around and do your checks that there's no standing water. Even when you look at the playground equipment, do we need to resurface? Do we need to have the safe surfacing?
This is the time when I start actually getting my phone calls about playgrounds. I think that they forget that the playground is there in the wintertime. It's covered with snow. We're not going outside. And that is the time where we really need to see what actually happened during the snow, what happened when the ground was frozen, how has our playground shifted, how has it changed. And I do agree that, you really need to start looking at that playground and seeing what might be different now that we need to ensure is safe for the children as they go out to play.
Great. I think there's also some paperwork, kind of logistical kind of stuff. What about shelter in place? Good time to do it in the spring?
Yeah.
I believe shelter in places should be done twice a year so that you can, it's just like going to your secondary location. You want to make sure that you have all that you need when you go into the shelter in place. Because even though you're still in the center or in the home, you may not be able to, you're not going to be able to get to all of the things that you have for the children. You're not going to get to your diaper changing table. You're not going to get to the kitchen. So you want to make sure as your shelter in place that you have what you need.
Yeah, great ideas. Thanks, ladies. Developing specific protocols for staff to follow before, during, and after outdoor time helps make sure you've done everything necessary to prepare the children in your program to explore the outdoors safely. Let's take a look at some ideas.
Here are some tips to keep in mind when taking children outside. Before going out, consult the Child Care Weather Watch chart to determine the duration of safe outdoor time based on how hot or cold it is. Consider your group size and plan for how you will supervise children during bathroom or other breaks. Apply sunscreen to children over 6 months of age 30 minutes prior to going outdoors. Wear gloves to apply sunscreen and change your gloves after each child's application. Apply insect repellent on children older than 2 months of age. Use only on exposed skin and the outside of the clothing, and never apply directly to a child's face. Organize any necessary supplies and make sure there is an easily accessible first aid kit nearby. While outdoors, note any areas of concern, such as the presence of insects or other hazards, or the need for shade. Do not let children play near areas where flying insects are visible or likely to be found, such as flower beds, flowering trees, and shrubs. Reapply sunscreen and insect repellent as necessary using proper application protocol. Make sure infants are kept out of direct sunlight and limit sun and heat exposure on very warm days. Make sure everyone stays hydrated. After outdoor time or any transition time, use face-to-name checks. Do not just count heads. Thoroughly wash all exposed skin on each child to clean off any sunscreen or repellents.
Heather, they mentioned face-to-name checks in that video. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. When you're moving children from one place to the other, whether it's a classroom going out to the playground or the playground back to the classroom, or if you have another spot that you are transporting children or transitioning children, it's really important just to not know a number, because numbers can be forgotten. You know, if you have left your classroom with a certain number and you go out to the playground and a child either gets picked up or dropped off, you know, you get confused with your numbers. There's a lot of movement. So it's much better to use a name-to-face strategy. So as you're taking your attendance, and there's some forms that, some programs actually that I've been working with have been really working on a form, so when they transition from the classroom out to the hallway, they're taking attendance and they're doing the name, but they're also connecting with a child's face, and then they are writing the time frame that they've done that. So they have that accountability that I saw the name, I saw the face, we're ready to go.
Yeah, sounds great. Tick checks are important for children and staff since these insects can be found in every part of the state, even New York City. We spoke with pediatrician Dr. Nathan Graber about the dangers posed by ticks and steps you can take to reduce the risk to children and staff.
Ticks are an insect that likes to hang out in tall grass and in the woods. They generally feed on wildlife, sometimes our pets, but sometimes they try to feed on our children. In general, ticks, the best way to prevent them is to keep the area that they spend most of their time clear of tall grasses and bushes and other things that the kids love to play in, but we know that that's where ticks like to hang out. And the second part of prevention is, of course, checking. When you have kids who've been out and they're playing in tall grass or near the edge of the woods, or even in grass, you know, during a season when it's been pretty wet and there's a lot of ticks around, it's important to check to see if there's a tick on the child. We start in those places, like right along the edge of the hair, behind the ears, in the underarms, on their back. And as they get older, teach them to check themselves. If you happen to notice that there's a tick on a child, it's important to call the parent or the pediatrician to get that tick removed.
Okay, so what should we do if we find a tick attached to a child?
We are not going to take it off. You're going to call the family and have them handle it, and whether they come or take them to the doctor.
Yep, they can take care of all the medical strategy.
Yep.
Now moving on, what types of cleaning activities can we work on in the spring?
So in the spring, when you're cleaning, you want to clean the equipment, wash down, clean it all up, your inside equipment as well as your outside equipment. And you want to make sure that you're using materials that are approved with the EPA.
And what about all that pollen and dust and everything? Do you think it's important to get rid of all that?
Oh, yes. As I said earlier, it's clean springing. I mean, it's clean springing, spring cleaning time. So we want to make sure, you know, you get that all out because the kids are inside. We may have allergies, and you want to be able to just open the doors, open the windows, and clean everything out.
Okay. What liquids should we be using for cleaning? What should we use for cleaning products?
Well, you want to use what's approved by the EPA, EPA approved, as well as bleach and water.
Perfect.
Yeah, many programs are just using soap and water as a simple cleaning agent, and then they're following up with the bleach and water solution. Yeah.
Great. Page 23 of your handouts contains information on cleaning schedules meant to keep your program safe. See page 26 for a sheet of labels for your bleach bottles that you can print out and attach with packing tape to make sure that you've always got the right solution available. Let's continue through the year now by looking at summertime safety.
Yay, it's summer. It's summer, it's summer. Now it's summer. Summer, summer, summer.
It's summer, it's summer, it's summer.
I like summer.
You just get to do a bunch of fun stuff in summer.
It's summertime. I'm so excited for playing outside and all the barbecues.
And water slides, and camp.
I like to swim.
It's swimming.
I like to swim in the summer.
I get to go swimming.
I like to swim.
My birthday's in summer, so summer is the best season ever. That's why I love summer.
As we just heard, the children in your care love summer and all that it entails. We also asked some of you what safety efforts are important in the summer. Let's take a look.
Summer would definitely be make sure they have sunscreen on so they're not getting burned by the sun.
We asked the parents to try the sunscreen at home first because, like I said 5 years ago, we started seeing that a lot of kids were having reactions.
Making sure that the sunscreen is applied 15 to 30 minutes before they go out so it has time to absorb into their skin to protect them.
Also, they are hydrated.
Heat rash if the kids are outside too much.
Heat exhaustion, making sure that we bring water out with us when we're playing outside.
Making sure that we have shade.
How you have to be careful when you swim.
Making sure we wear appropriate footwear.
Okay, so according to the National Safety Council, drowning is the 4th leading cause of accidental death. A child can drown in any body of water, no matter how shallow or safe it appears. Most drownings take place in fresh water, often in home swimming pools. Most children drown within a few feet of safety and in the presence of a supervising adult. There's no substitute for vigilant supervision. Whenever a pool is in use, whether children are poolside or in the pool area at a daycare program, all daycare children of all ages, regardless of their swimming abilities or maturity levels, must have direct supervision. Adequate pool supervision must include a trained person. So tell me, what do we mean by trained person? What does that mean?
Well, in a family and group family, you have to have a person who, one, knows how to swim, and a person who is trained and certified in CPR.
Great. What about daycare center and school-age programs?
In the daycare center and school-age program, you must have a person who is a certified lifeguard and also has a CPR and first aid.
Okay, great. Anything to add? Okay. What are some things that we need to plan for when we're being around water and children?
You want to definitely plan your supervision.
Okay.
You want to make sure that your ratios are maintained. You want to make sure that you have permissions, written permissions from parents for children to swim. You just want to definitely make sure that your plan, you have a written plan of what will happen in emergencies, what actions will be taken, so that your staff, your staff, as well as parents know.
And we've got a graphic up on the screen now. It talks about the importance of prior written permission from the families. Why is that so important?
Well, that goes back to that family communication. Right. You know, when my daughter had been swimming for a little while, but we had gone to a party and I would have never suspected that she would have lost tracking and not gained going underneath because she didn't know how to swim really well. So I think having that permission ahead of time, if a parent knew that their child was swimming and didn't have permission, that probably would not be so good for the communication that you're having with parents. So it's really important.
Great. Now, not everybody has access to a pool, so what are some water activities that are appropriate if swimming just isn't an option?
Sprinklers are always a fun thing.
Nope, sprinklers for sure.
We used to also do car washes, or I guess the bike washes, or the little tight cars, so that we would have, like, you know, the water and just letting them get wet with the sponges and fun things like that. I know a program in our area, the husband was really crafty and made something really cool out of PVC piping. So like the water was coming everywhere and children could just walk through it.
Oh, cool.
You know, so really be creative with the water.
Yeah. Any other ideas? Maybe infants, what might you use with them?
Well, They do have the little like the little type fire hose sprinkler that you can still hold infants and allow them to get wet.
Yep.
You know, you want to, you know, when it's really hot, keep them moist, sponge them down, make sure that they're cool.
Yeah, I could see even putting out bowls of water with scoops and different containers.
Cookie sheets. If you use a cookie sheet and they can just splash, you have a very little bit of water, but they think it's fun to just kind of hit it and get wet.
Great. Now, what about wading pools?
No.
That seemed like a definite answer. Why no wading pools?
Well, it's a drowning hazard, but also think of the infection control that would be in a wading pool. It's not moving the water, it's just stagnant water that's there, but it's really a drowning hazard.
Yeah.
And they're prohibited by regulation.
Yep, prohibited by regulation. Thank you. Now, heat-related illnesses such as heat cramps and heat stroke can occur after exercise in hot or humid conditions where the body becomes dehydrated. We asked Dr. Nathan Graber about different types of heat illness and what to watch out for. Let's listen.
Heat illness describes these three categories: heat stress, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke. So you have a child who's been running around outside on a very hot day, and it's not just hot, it's humid. Because temperature is not the only factor. So they have these great diagrams that show what the temperature is versus what the humidity is, or versus temperature versus the wind chill, and then when you're kind of in the danger zones for having kids spend way too much time outdoors. When you have a high, what's called heat index, because of the high temperature and high humidity, that puts a lot of stress on the body. The body tries to cool itself, and other factors are things like acclimatization, which is early in the season, the risk for heat illness, even at lower temperatures, is higher than in the middle of the season when the temperatures get higher, the middle of the summer season. If you have a child who's running around playing, which kids love to do outside, and let's say it's sunny, which adds another factor of exposing them to lots of heat, then they can progress from the mild heat illness, called heat stress, into what's called heat exhaustion. In heat exhaustion, the child may start sweating a lot more. Because of that sweat, their skin, it may feel really either hot or really cold sometimes. They can have changes in behavior, can start during that time, become kind of irritable, not behaving themselves. At this point, their mechanisms for controlling their body temperature are starting to break down. Their clothes become soaked because of the sweat, and then it traps that kind of heat against their body. They have all this warm moisture against their body now, and they're not releasing as much heat. It can progress even more to the point where they start vomiting, becoming nauseous, maybe even becoming dizzy. And at that point, you may recognize them running around and see that they've become kind of clumsy. In infants, you may not recognize these symptoms as easily. They may simply be turning, very, red and sweaty, maybe breathing a little bit faster to try to compensate for some of that. But remember, the younger the kids are, the less ability they have to control their own environments. So it really becomes dependent on adults caring for these children to make adjustments to the environment that will then allow them to start cooling down. So when it progresses beyond heat exhaustion, then we get into heat stroke. Heat stroke is a complete breakdown of the body's ability to thermoregulate. So when you have a child who has heat exhaustion, which is that middle category, which is that moderate heat illness, their body temperature may be as high as 104, but in heat stroke, it goes above 104 and it starts getting out of control. They can no longer reduce that body temperature on their own. They need help. They really need help from the environment. In addition, other things start happening. When you feel them, they feel very dry because they're not sweating anymore. At this point, they could be very dehydrated. Dehydration progresses throughout all of heat illness to get to the severe form. And as a result, the blood volume drops. The heart starts trying to work harder. So they could be bright red at that point, or even very, very pale, because they're starting to go the direction where their heart just can't keep up with the need to try to perfuse the entire body. Here, it's not just a little bit of confusion and clumsiness. This is where children who are experiencing heat stroke, if they're still conscious, become completely irrational. Before they progress to unconsciousness, it's really important to get them into a cool environment and to call 911.
If you notice signs of any heat illness in a child, institute your emergency plan right away and seek medical attention. Notify parents and OCFS as soon as possible. The Child Care Weather Watch chart Dr. Graber mentioned can be found on page 6 of your materials. Another place children really enjoy spending lots of time in the summer is on the playground. This might be a neighborhood park, a contained area in a center-based program, or the play area in a home-based provider's yard. So what should playground safety mean to us?
Well, I think you need to be aware of the equipment that you have on the playground first and foremost, making sure that that's safe and that the parts are all functioning in the proper way and that it's installed, of course, the way that manufacturer specification, and that you have good resilient surfacing. That's a really great start. The other piece that I think is important is knowing child development. What are the abilities of the children that you're working with and their skills when it comes to the equipment that they're using?
Yeah, perfect. Summertime also makes us think of field trips to local attractions. There's a lot to consider before taking children on a field trip, regardless of the size of a program. Careful planning and preparation can make it a great learning experience and a safe adventure for children. So what should we think about when considering a field trip?
One of the things you should consider is, first of all, making sure that you have parental permission to take children on a field trip. Transportation, how you're going to get there. Do you have the right car seats, booster seats? You want to make sure you pre-plan and have that all in place. In addition, you also want to make sure that wherever you're taking the children, you need to know your children. If you're going to a zoo, do you have children who are afraid of some of the animals at the zoo? So knowing your children, talking with parents, the communication again, having the communication with parents to have an understanding about what their children like or are afraid of is going to be helpful.
Sounds great. Now, regulations state that field trips with an itinerary that includes an activity where emergency medical care is not readily available and/or an activity such as, but not limited to, wilderness hiking, rock climbing, horseback riding, bicycling, must be accompanied by a staff who possess a current first aid certificate and cardiopulmonary resuscitation or CPR certification. If off-site events are part of the program's activities, the child care program must develop and share with its program staff written plans that cover field trip events. So how can you plan for adequate supervision?
Well, lots of times when you're taking a field trip, you're thinking about what is the supervision looking like in program, but you may engage families in joining you at that. And so then you're going to have the extra hands and eyes, not that they're meant to be left in ratio, but that they're helping as well.
Great. How can we plan for emergencies that might happen when we're out on a field trip?
Well, when you have an emergency, again, we never know when we're going to have an emergency. So just as you have your emergency plans in the home or in the center, you want to make sure that you share with your staff what to do in case there is an emergency. Make sure that you have cell phones so that if you need to call 911. Make sure that you have your blue cards with you so that you have the parental information and the contact so that you can reach parents if there is an emergency.
Great. I imagine, too, you want to plan in case a child goes missing. What are some things you should consider with that?
Well, I think that's where it goes back to supervision. Yes. I know that it happens, but it really shouldn't be the practice. Your practice should be that you really have a good supervision plan. So whether you're assigning which teacher is responsible for which children, and they have that name-to-face chart. I mean, I wouldn't just use the name-to-face kind of accountability for supervision just for program, but to continue that wherever you're at. And on a field trip would be especially important to have that so that you don't have to lose a child. But I would have, what are your next steps if that does happen?
When I worked at a daycare center years ago, we would take a picture of the whole group so that if any child went missing, we'd have a photograph that had what clothing they were wearing and all that.
Or I know some programs have like the same shirt. Right. So whatever the program is that they've maybe created in the beginning of the summer, done a tie-dyed shirt or something fun like that. And so whenever we go on a field trip, this is the shirt that we're going to wear too. And that does help.
Helps them to identify for the police what the child was wearing. And that's a really good idea.
Yeah, perfect. Now, planning and preparation can make all the difference in organizing fun and safe activities for the children in your care. Let's walk through some of the other roles that need to be filled, and let's start with medical. What do we need to think of when we think of medical going on field trips?
If you have children who have who need EpiPens, who have medication that they take during the day at the center, you want to make sure that you have that medication with you. You also have to think about if you have medication that needs to be refrigerated, how are you going to keep that cold so that you can the children can have their medication while they're on that field trip.
Great. I know, Heather, you had mentioned before your to-go bag during a drill. How do you decide who carries that to-go bag and who brings that with them?
Yeah, so I think that has to be decided ahead of time. You know, that was something that for even emergency drills, we decided, was it me as the head teacher that was going to take it? Was the assistant teacher? So I think you have to know that plan ahead of time, which makes sense for you to have that to-go bag.
Great. Yeah. Do we need to think about volunteers?
Yes. Yes, I think so. I remember when I was a preschool teacher, when we would go on field trips, I loved having parents along with me. And it wasn't like they just showed up that day. I would have a conversation with the parents who sign up to volunteer outside of time so that they kind of knew the expectations. Because I think that's sometimes the problem, is we're not sure. You know, we have a parent that comes and volunteers, and I know that programs get nervous that, are they really going to help? Are they not? But if you really set the expectations of what am I expecting you to be as a volunteer and have that really outlined for them, it really helps. But I'm definitely one for volunteers on a field trip.
And although they're volunteers and they're there to help, they don't count in your ratio.
Correct. Correct. Remember that.
Now, programs can provide transportation either directly or by contract with a third party providing transportation for children. But you are required to have a transportation plan that is approved by OCFS. You also need specific written permission from parents for transporting their children. There is the OCFS 6013 Transportation Consent Form, which can be found on the Child Care Forms page at the address you're seeing on your screen. The transportation plan is shared with parents when a child enters your care, and again, anytime a change is made. Remember, it's critical that everyone involved in transporting children knows the plan to physically and visually check the vehicle to make sure every child is off and safe, and that face-to-name checks are being conducted. So now that we've planned, how can we prepare the children for a field trip?
Go ahead. Doing some pre-planning with the children, talking about the field trip, talking about where they're going ahead of time, you know, maybe a week ahead of time. And, you know, you can get pictures of the place that they're going so that they can become familiar, so that they understand. You're going to talk about safety with them, talk about if you're taking a bus, or if you're taking vans, how they are to behave on the van, be in their seat belts, be in their car seats, etc. You want to talk to them all the things that you're going to do. You don't want to give it to them the day that they're leaving. That's a lot. It's overwhelming. So you want to talk to them and prepare them throughout the week or a couple weeks ahead of time.
Great. What should we communicate with families? What should that communication with families entail when we're going on a field trip?
I would say a lot of the same things that you're communicating to the children. You know, this is what's going to happen on the field trip, when we're going to leave, what time we're coming back, what are some things that we may need parents to help us with, whether it's making sure they're sending their sunscreen, making sure that they're sending, if it's someplace that they're going to get wet, to have a towel there, you know, maybe the ins and outs of what particulars we might need their support with.
All great ideas. Yeah. Thank you. Proper supervision is vital anytime you take children away from the program, whether on a field trip to the zoo, a day at the local park, or even a walk around the block. Always use a pre-planned route and be aware of your surroundings, including traffic and any hazards such as loose animals. We spoke to expert dog handler and certified animal behavioralist Kevin Holohan about what signs can tell you that a dog might be uncomfortable or aggressive.
There are the clear ones that people over the years have just kind of figured on their own. Growling, snarling, showing their teeth. Their posture becomes very rigid, so instead of like a smooth gait, they start to stiffen their legs up. Their tail position is another indicator, so generally the higher it starts to set up, the more excited they are. The way they hold their head, you know, up and more confident is an indicator. But it's not just one thing, it's a combination of the things, you know. So you really, if you have like a loose dog scenario, the first rule right out of the gate is just to let the dog be. one of the mistakes that a lot of people make is that they feel the need to go and kind of make themselves friendly to the dog. The dog will make the decision when that happens. So, and the handler should be there, but if it's a case of a loose dog, but if the dog is off doing its own thing, you just kind of continue on, but there's no reason to kind of push yourself on the dog. There are other indicators that are more subtle. So for example, like this isn't a case of aggression, but if you notice his ears and head and went straight up, and like his ears are kind of like rifle sights. They immediately looked in one direction, and his body posture changed, his breathing changed. That's all indications he's interested in something. So when you're walking down the street, even if someone has a dog, like those are all indicators that the dog may not be totally relaxed. And the handler, and even you, if the handler doesn't pick up on that, you can say, hey, you know what, maybe I'll hold off going near the dog.
Keep children safe by thinking ahead and being ready for summer activities. You can reinforce safety ideas and routines by making them fun. Now let's turn your attention to the fall safety routines and what we should be focusing on.
It's fall. I'm so excited for all the leaves to start changing.
I love fall.
And Halloween
fall,
and Thanksgiving.
Now it's fall.
It's fall.
I like
fall
fall
because you can jump in the leaves.
It's fall. I love fall. The leaves are falling.
It's around Halloween time and you can carve pumpkins.
Halloween's in the fall.
You can trick or treat around your neighborhood. Thanksgiving is in fall.
I like to dress up for Halloween.
I love all the different colors of leaves.
And Halloween and Thanksgiving. I just love fall.
In the fall, I would say the biggest safety concern is that the weather's constantly changing, and I want to make sure that the children are dressed appropriately for that day.
They put like the leaves and things in their mouths.
Most of the time it's just the clothing for the kids.
Making sure that they have their jackets.
Halloween. Making sure you're keeping an eye on the weather and being prepared.
Okay, ladies, so what should be on our fall safety to-do list?
You know, fall is very much like what we talked about with spring. You know, it's another opportunity for us to do some of the checks on our smoke detectors and making sure the batteries are there. But also, if you think about it, it's also starting back up to school. You know, I know a lot of childcare programs, they rotate children all the time, but there's few that, you know, they stay with the same classroom all year. So it's a brand new startup. So thinking about that blue card, you know, and updating that blue card and making sure that that's current with whatever the information that parents need to have current on it.
Great. And you mentioned the shelter-in-place drills, yep, all that kind of stuff. Yep. Keep going with all those. If you do them on a regular basis, I imagine that helps.
Correct. Yep.
Great. Fall is also a good time to check fire extinguishers. Be sure to check regulations and contact your fire safety representative for any questions. Fire extinguishers expire in 5 to 15 years, so check the label or the tag on each unit in your program and consider replacing them if necessary. You should never try to fight a fire on your own. Always follow your emergency plan by evacuating immediately and calling 911. But you need to know how to use a fire extinguisher in case it's necessary to get children safely out of the building. We spoke to fire safety consultant Peter Latenzio about how to operate a fire extinguisher. Let's watch.
Hello, my name is Pete Latenzio, and I'm a fire safety consultant, and I've been in the fire safety industry for a long time. Fire has changed drastically over the years, and it's basically because of what we're bringing into our homes and our businesses today. A lot of our materials in our homes and our businesses are petroleum-based. Foam rubbers, plastics, synthetic materials, they're all petroleum-based. Therefore, fires burn much faster today, and they burn much hotter, and they're producing a lot of very toxic gases that are off-gas during a fire that are very toxic for folks to breathe in. Life safety, again, is the most important. We can replace buildings, we can't replace the people that are in it. So getting people out is the most important thing. But there are those rare occasions where an incident may occur, and you might want to, especially for life safety purposes, either to get yourself out or to get somebody you're caring for, to get them out, you might want to use a fire extinguisher. This is a typical fire extinguisher that we find in commercial businesses and in programs such as where you are. This is an all-purpose fire extinguisher. If you look at the extinguisher, it actually has pictograms on the front. And down here below, it talks about the ABC, the combustible papers, the wood, the flammable liquids, the electrical fires. So you want to familiarize yourself to make sure that at your facility you have an ABC extinguisher. There are other extinguishers that are out there, but they're done for specific hazards, but this is what you should typically see in one of your facilities. So up above the classifications, there's another set of pictograms and an explanation of exactly how to use the extinguisher. So we don't expect people to remember this like you remember your ABCs from school. You don't use these very often. So this is just a quick reminder of how to use the extinguisher. On the gauge, we have a green section right in the center, and there's a little yellow indicator, a little yellow arrow. We want to see that yellow arrow up into the green. This is telling us that this extinguisher has been properly charged and it's ready to go. If you ever happen to glance down and see this arrow off to this side of the gauge, it's telling us that either the extinguisher has been used or that for some reason there's been a pressure leak and this extinguisher is not going to function the way it's designed. These hang on the wall all the time. We never think about them. The fire extinguisher company, by code, has to come through once a year and maintain them. But the other thing I like to tell people to do is periodically take the extinguisher off, tip it upside down, and shake it. Because what it helps do is it helps keep that powder suspended inside the extinguisher. Over a period of time, if it's not fluffed, they refer to it, is the powder can have a settling effect and it may not work properly. So we want to shake these extinguishers periodically. Just turn them upside down and give them a good shake. There is a pin in the top of this and it's held in with a little plastic tab. I can hold this extinguisher by this bottom handle and there's no problem with it. It's not going to activate, it won't discharge. Even as long as the pin's in place, I can squeeze both handles together and nothing's going to happen. But once I pull that pin out, and we'll demonstrate that in just a few minutes, once I pull the pin out, that top handle is now allowed to squeeze down to the bottom handle and it'll discharge the product. Okay, this extinguisher is a little bit smaller. Same premise though, it's got the cylinder, it's going to hold product, it's got the handle and it's got the nozzle on it, but this one has a fixed nozzle to it. So instead of having the ability to use the hose and to aim it properly a little bit better, this one's a much smaller product with that fixed nozzle. They're both going to do the same job. This one, the bigger one, just gives you a little bit more flexibility. One of the big things I want you to understand is there's a limited amount of product in both of these extinguishers. So this is not something that's going to last for a long period of time. You're probably looking, once you start to discharge this, anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes for all the product in these cylinders to be empty. So this is not a product or a appliance that you're going to continue to use and think that you're going to have a long amount of time. This is a down and dirty. You can knock the fire down to the best of your ability to get yourself or get somebody else out of the way, and then you abandon these and get out and let the fire department handle the rest. Using a fire extinguisher, there's an acronym, it's called PASS, P-A-S-S, and it's a very common acronym that's used throughout the fire safety industry, and it basically stands for pull the pin, aim, squeeze the handle, and sweep. And I'm going to demonstrate all those sections for you. So as we mentioned before, the extinguishers come through, the pin is in place, I can hold the handles, nothing's going to happen. But the minute I pull this pin out, I now have the ability to squeeze the handles together to activate it. These have a plastic safety tab in place to help ensure that that pin stays in place all the time. So when I have to use the extinguisher, I want to pull, and that plastic tab will break right away very easily. So now this extinguisher is ready for activation. So we've discovered a fire. Obviously, if you have the ability to get out, you don't have to do anything, get out of the building, get away from the incident. But if you have to get past the fire, or somebody's trapped and you want to get to them quickly, you can use the fire extinguisher to do that. We have a piece of paper laying over on the ground that's going to simulate where the fire is. Now there's a couple important things to remember when using a fire extinguisher. Number one, distance. You need to be at least 6 to 10 feet away from the fire. If you're too close, you can actually cause the fire to get worse. You can blow the fire around. So you want to be that 6 to 10 feet away from the fire itself. So the fire is to the front of me. I've grabbed my extinguisher. I'm going to use that pass method. I'm going to pull the pin. I'm going to pull the nozzle out and aim the nozzle. I'm going to sweep or squeeze the handles together, and then I'm going to sweep it back and forth at the base of the fire. So today we've given you a little bit of an idea how to use these extinguishers. I hope that you never ever have to use it, but if you do, I hope there's a little bit of a comfort factor there for you, that you can do this, you can do it successfully, and you know, hopefully prevent somebody from getting injured or dying in a fire. Thank you very much.
Okay, so programs like to display children's artwork on the walls. What should we be aware of when it comes to this?
Well, we love to see children's artwork displayed, but we also want to make sure that providers are going back to the regulations, reading the regulations, and knowing that you can only display a certain percentage on the walls. So you want to make sure that you look at the regulations before you display too much.
Yep, that's fire, so we're preventing
Yes,
fire,
yes.
the walls from going up too quickly if anything
Yep,
did
so check
happen.
the regulations.
Great. Fall is a great time to schedule a thorough cleaning of your program and to get rid of all the dust and pollen that may have collected on surfaces during the summer. This also helps you prepare for cold and flu season in the coming winter months. Remember to consult your approved healthcare plan, Appendix E, cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting for requirements on what needs to be cleaned and when. This can be found on page 23 of your participant materials. We want to mention the healthcare plan form on the OCFS website has recently been updated with larger text boxes and text wrapping features, so please check the website for that. Awareness of environmental health and its impacts on children has led to a focus on eco-healthy childcare practices. Eco-healthy childcare is a national program aimed at eliminating environmental health hazards found in programs. They partner with and endorse providers who agree to comply with a set of low-cost best practices to eliminate environmental hazards and create safer spaces for children. For more information, including the Best Practices Eco-Healthy Childcare Checklist, please visit their website. So let's talk about what kinds of things should we be communicating to parents in the fall?
Well, you want to talk about weather. Weather is changing, so we want to make sure that children have the proper outdoor jackets, clothing. I know a lot of times kids don't want to give up wearing their shorts and their short sleeve shirts, but we want to make sure that children are dressed properly for the weather. It's also a good time, as we said before, to update the blue cards, so make sure that you have the most recent contact information for parents. You want to talk to parents about any outdoor activities that you might be doing, just so that they're aware, because the weather has changed, and so you want to make sure that they're aware.
Yeah, Heather, you mentioned earlier that back to school, so that's a good time to update forms, share policies.
Yeah, I'm thinking that, when they're starting back to school, you may want to refresh parents of your policies and procedures that you have in your program. Maybe you have spent your summer months in the downtime revising some of your policies and making sure that, of course, those policies and procedures are right in line with regulations.
Great. How can we incorporate fall safety into our curriculum?
Oh, when I was a teacher, it was so much fun in October to talk about Fire Safety Month. Of course, we have to do it as a provider, but to really talk to the children about fire safety. We used to do it near Halloween, so we would have our local fire department come, and they wouldn't come in full gear because children would be really afraid of the full gear. But they would come in their street clothes and then put on the full gear, and we would say, kind of like when you dress up for Halloween, they're wearing something, but this protects them, because we don't want children to be afraid of the community helpers when they're coming in to help them. So that was our focus when I was in the classroom.
Great. Visits from professionals always connect with children, but it's important to prepare for the visit in advance. Contact presenters ahead of time to share details about the size of your program and ages and developmental levels of the children. This allows them to tailor the visit to what children will understand and process. Explain what you're working on and ask the visitors to echo these lessons if possible. It's also a good idea to suggest good time frames for the visit to avoid snack, lunch, or nap times. Now, let's turn our attention to safety tasks and activities you need to think about during the winter to keep children safe.
Now it's winter. It's winter now. It's winter again. I love winter. It's winter time. It's winter time. I like the snow, and I get to wear my mittens again, and my snow pants, and my snow boots. Winter is the best, and you get to do a bunch of fun stuff. In the winter, I like to drink hot chocolate. Hot cocoa, my favorite. It's winter. I'm so excited for all the snow and the sledding and all the hot chocolate. During the winter, I like to play hockey out. I don't mind the cold because I play outside. I get to play in the snow with my friends. I like to go sleigh riding. I like to watch the snow fall. I like to watch the snow fall. Winter, 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 winter. It's just really fun. It's winter.
In the winter, it's close.
Not getting frostbite or anything like that.
Cold temperatures, making sure that if it is above 20 degrees that we're not staying out too long.
Making sure we keep our hats and gloves on so our bodies don't get cold.
Definitely ice.
Children's clothes can become very wet, so we want to constantly check to make sure we get them inside.
Parents track in salt and we track in salt, so just making sure the kids don't eat salt in the classroom.
Keeping an eye out for children who are really cold, hypothermia, any kind of signs that you see of child in distress, making sure that your eyes are on them and you're watching to make sure they are okay.
Winter brings with it the obvious safety concerns related to the weather, like slippery driving and snow removal. Not only do you need to keep all entrances and exits clear for families and staff, but you also want to make sure tools like shovels and ice melt are properly stored and out of children's reach. So how can we manage the snow and ice removal during program hours?
Well, before program starts, we'll start there. Before program starts, you want to make sure that you have someone that's going around the building of a center, making sure that the exits are clear, the walkways are clear, because you don't want children and families coming to the center and slipping and sliding. And then during the day, you also need to have people that are able to go out and, if it's still snowing, continuously remove the snow. So, and then the ice, you have to look for ice, make sure that you don't have areas where ice builds up and where ice can begin to fall.
I was going to add to that, if you have a specific person that's responsible for that, have a plan B. I know a program who that person was out for a medical purpose and all the other walkways were shoveled except for the back entrance, their secondary route, because they were so used to him just doing that. We always call it magically happens. But when that person's not there, you want to have a plan B too. So making sure that everything, whether you have it on a check sheet of what needs to be done, whatever helps you make sure that it's all finished.
Yeah, it seems like a bit of a balancing act. Maybe leave a shovel out there and ask the parents to help if they're willing and able. What else should we think about for indoor winter safety?
I liked how the teacher said, thinking about the salt. That was something actually new that I learned from the video tonight. That salt will come in on the boots, on the shoes, and to be really mindful of not leaving that there, because a small child could ingest that and that would not be safe for them to have. So thinking about what might be brought into your program during the winter.
And the water from the boots, making sure that your hallways are not slippery, there's not water, standing water where people can fall. One center that I went to used the boot trays, and they put them on top of the bookshelves. Not the bookshelves, the clothing. And so that cubbies, thank you. So they had them up there, and so that they weren't on the floor where people,
great idea,
could slip and fall.
Spreading water, great. Now this may be a time you're bringing new toys into your program as well. Be sure to check all new toys and equipment for any recalls or safety alerts. Safety and recall information can be found on the Consumer Product Safety Commission's website at the address on your screen. In addition to checking for recalled products, make sure children have access to toys appropriate for their age and development, and that you're supervising properly. Let's watch this next clip to find out which kind of toys are appropriate for children of different developmental levels.
Hundreds of new toys hit store shelves every year. So how can you tell which ones to spend your hard-earned money on? Here are some guidelines you can follow when choosing toys and learning materials for children of different ages. Young infants, children from birth to 8 months, do a lot of their learning by looking, listening, and mouthing. They are not very mobile, so they rely on you to give them a change of scenery. Toys typically go straight into their mouths, so nothing should be small enough for them to swallow. By 8 months, they should be poking, twisting, pulling, and dumping. When selecting toys for young infants, they should have one or more of these qualities: bright or contrasting colors, interesting designs, movable parts such as balls, shiny reflective surfaces such as unbreakable mirrors mounted to the wall at the children's eye level or small unbreakable ones to hold, noisy parts such as rattles, pots and pans, and squeaky toys, tactile surfaces such as texture balls and cloth and rubber balls, dolls, or books, and chewable materials such as teething rings or blankets. Just be sure the objects are not able to be swallowed.
Here you go, guys.
Older infants are children from approximately 8 to 18 months. They might be crawlers, waddlers, or walkers. Their newfound ability to move delights and excites them. Their language skills are growing rapidly, and they can use their hands more and more to make things happen. Large motor toys for older infants should allow them to safely crawl over, under, and through them. This might take the form of an obstacle course made up of large cushions or empty cardboard boxes. Give them many opportunities to safely balance, rock, and climb, and provide things they can push, like low items they can hold on to while walking or ride. Small motor toys for older infants should be able to be held and manipulated, make noise or do something when manipulated, and provide them with their first opportunities to scribble.
There we go, pop 'em.
2-year-olds are very active and becoming increasingly independent. They are more aware of others and like to imitate them. They are becoming more familiar with their community and can do lots of things with their fingers and hands. Toys for toddlers and 2-year-olds should come apart and go back together, be able to be dumped and refilled, sometimes require cooperation, allow for jumping, throwing, and kicking, be able to be pushed, pulled, or ridden, and give children many opportunities to pretend and explore, experiment, and master objects they use. 2.5 to 3-year-olds sometimes seem like toddlers, while at other times they seem very grown up. Much of their play is done alone or with 1 or 2 other children, and occasionally they are able to share. They are very active, curious, and learning more about language. Toys and learning materials for the 2.5 to 3-year-old should allow them to try out and practice new skills, use numbers and letters in real situations, do lots of running, jumping, pushing, pulling, galloping, and riding, and give them many opportunities to explore cause and effect. Older preschoolers, children from age 3 to 5, are increasingly able to plan what they want to do and carry out those plans. They can play together in small groups for as long as 30 minutes or more. Their dramatic play is much more involved, and their early literacy and math skills are growing daily. Their friendships are more stable, and they can take turns. Learning materials for older preschoolers should give them opportunities to write and use letters and numbers for meaningful purposes. Allow them to play together cooperatively. Help them acquire early literacy skills. Use more small muscles. Have lots of activity, and help them learn more about people and cultural diversity. Elementary school-age children have newly acquired skills and abilities. They are aware of and understand the world around them and are beginning to master skills. Their interests and talents steer their play. Large and fine motor skills are being refined, projects become more detailed, and peer relationships become more important. Some recommended toys and learning materials for school-age children are cards and board games that help them learn about strategy, taking turns, negotiating rules, fair play, cooperation, and managing emotions surrounding winning and losing. Science toys that promote discovery and problem solving help improve math and science skills and help develop imagination. Musical instruments to encourage listening and fine motor skills and help build attention skills. And toys that encourage physical activity, such as balls, hula hoops, and jump ropes, to build coordination skills, encourage large motor development, and problem-solving skills. Regardless of a child's age, here are some general guidelines to keep in mind when selecting toys or learning materials. Materials should be appealing and interesting to the children and offer many opportunities for success. The best toys respectfully reflect children's family lives as well as provide opportunities for exploring other cultures. Items for classrooms are durable and suitable for use with groups. Many items offered at local toy stores are designed for home use by 1 or 2 children over a short period of time, not for a classroom of children for years. Great toys are well constructed, shatterproof, and safe for the ages of the children in the group. Don't be hesitant to carefully examine and pull on the item at the store or when you first receive it to ensure it's safe for the children. Materials should not have sharp edges, points, exposed nails, projectiles, loud noises, or require batteries. Corners should be rounded and surfaces smooth. Finishes and dyes should be non-toxic and meet all safety standards. And great toys and materials must be easily cleansed and hold up to repeated washings.
Much like routines for summer outdoor safety, you should also develop routines and practices for winter outdoor safety. Let's go over signs of cold-related illness such as frostbite and hypothermia. Here's Dr. Nathan Graber for more information.
And kids are much more vulnerable to the cold than adults are. And the younger they are, the more that's true. So infants can get cold much quicker than adults in the same environment. Any exposed skin is vulnerable to frostbite. Most often it occurs on the extremities like toes and fingers. It can occur in clothing and underclothing, especially if the clothing gets wet because of sweat, and kids love to run around, so their socks and the insides of their gloves can get very cold. And the other places that it occurs on kids are ears and cheeks and on the tip of their nose. And the first thing that happens when the skin is exposed to cold is that it gets really red. And that's the body sending as much blood to that area as possible to try to rewarm it. But then the capillaries in the extremities where they're exposed start to constrict. And as they constrict, the blood flow goes down and it starts to turn pale white. Then what's left, the moisture underneath, can actually freeze. And when you form ice crystals under the skin, that's called frostbite. And that can be a very serious condition. It's like a burn. First thing to do is make sure that you remove any cold clothing, particularly if it's wet. So if their socks got wet, you need to take them off. If you notice that their toes are really either blue or very white, they have to be warmed very quickly. One very important thing to do, or not to do, when a child has frostbite is to rub their hands, rub their ears. That can actually cause a lot of damage. It doesn't take a very cold temperature to cause what's known as hypothermia. Hypothermia is just a very low body temperature. We often hear of it happening in cases where children have been in the water for too long, either in drowning situations or near drowning or in playing outside. Hypothermia, the body temperature is below 97. In mild hypothermia, the first thing that happens is they're shivering a lot. Okay? And that's the body's way to kind of produce heat. They could be a little bit pale, and their hands and toes can be blue, okay, because the body's trying to conserve as much core body temperature as possible. And at that point, they may feel a little bit tired, but generally are normal. They feel fine. They're just shivering a lot. When they progress to moderate hypothermia, where the temperature drops even more, then they can become a little bit either confused or a little bit sleepy, not necessarily themselves. Much paler in appearance because the body's really clamping down. They're no longer shivering because their body just isn't compensating anymore, isn't trying to produce more heat. So hypothermia can progress. When it becomes more severe, children may act very bizarre. They start to do these kind of odd things. Then you know you're in an emergency situation.
Okay, so he was talking about hypothermia, frostbite. What do we do if a child exhibits any of these signs?
Well, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to bring them inside. If they have any wet clothing, you want to remove the wet clothing, put warm clothing on them, maybe put a blanket around them.
What about heating pads and things like that? Should we use those?
No, you want to make sure that you're warming them up kind of slowly and gently. We're not using heating pads. We're not going to rub, and create friction to warm them up that way either. And then, of course,
Tina
go
has
ahead.
something to
Yeah.
add too.
And the director or a teacher in charge wants to make sure that they contact the regulator, contact the Office of Children and Family Services, and let them know that they had a serious incident.
Great, thank you. Now, another great safety activity you can work with children is teaching them to remember vital information such as name, address, and phone number. This is important information for children to know, and even young children can retain details that can help keep them safe in an emergency. We spoke to some of you about the creative ways you teach children about personal safety.
In regards to teaching children about safety, we find it very important that the children trust us with their feelings. We want them to know, however you're feeling, we want you to tell us. Trust your teachers, the adults in the room, we will help you.
When we teach them to be safe, we try to make sure we're modeling good behavior for them, but also explaining why we don't want them to do things or why it's not a good idea to do something.
And it's pictures and books, and we're asking them, say for us, what happened at something maybe with you, and what did you do, or what your parents did.
We do a lot of reading. It's really one of the main ways that we teach them, other than we do a lot of modeling too. We model a lot of these things out to show them how we want it done appropriately for their safety.
We have cards, and on a card we have a phone number, and we are asking parents only about one phone number. Usually it's for transition time, and we are doing it very often. Brandon, come to me, and we are going to, here is your name, here is your phone number, and we are going together. And we repeat it a couple times. Sometimes for our activity on the tables, we are taking these phone numbers and we print them, or we trace them, and they just sitting on the table and they enjoy it too. They just taking markers or crayons, they go on a tub, they decorate it.
A really big thing we talk about a lot though is their parents' first names, because a lot of them don't know that coming in. And I want them to know, just in case they ever do get lost or separated and someone asks them, who's your mom? If they say mommy, that's not gonna help them get back where they belong.
When we go for walks, we always model things like stop, look to your left, look to your right. Do you see a car coming? If you don't, you may go. If you do, let's wait together.
It's time for an activity session. We've covered a lot of great information on things to think about and do each season to keep your program safe throughout the year. Let's take some time now to think about what you've learned and how you can apply it at your program. Based on what you've heard, take the next few minutes to note some things that you will now do or check or schedule in each season that maybe hadn't occurred to you before. If you get it done early, talk about your answers with the others at your site and see what other ideas your colleagues find helpful. We'll see you in a few minutes. Welcome back. It's not just our routines and practices that are important for safety, but also our awareness of situations and our preparedness to respond and address any concerns. Let's take a look now at some common areas of childcare that require careful thought and safe practices. Food safety and healthy preparation are critical in childcare programs. Here's Chef Melissa Doney with some tips for keeping your program's food supply safe.
Scott, we need to find out what the temperature is. Hello, I'm Chef Melissa Doney, and I'm here in Brown's Brewing Company in Troy, New York, in our tap room to show you about food safety. When shopping, you always want to consider checking your produce before purchasing it. You want to look, inspect it, check for firmness, see if it's all right and what the quality is. Also, when looking at dry goods, you want to check your expiration dates and also the packaging. On canned goods, you don't want to purchase anything with dents. Bacteria can grow in that. You want to check your frozen products for quality. Check for ice crystals on any frozen items that there is a clear plastic outside. You want to make sure you don't have freezer burn. Also check your bags for any holes or pokes in them to make sure that quality is there. And remember, when it comes to dairy, you only want to use pasteurized products and always use 100% fruit juice. Now that you're back at your program, it's time to put your groceries away. Let's do this smart and safe. Remember, you always want to start with your proteins, your most perishable products. So let's start with any of our frozen proteins and any of our frozen items first. This way, our items won't start melting and won't get into the temperature danger zone. Next, we're going to put our refrigerated items away. With that, we want to put them in the proper storage order of how they should be stored so cross-contamination doesn't happen. Food prep safety, extremely important. Well, the first thing we want to do is always wash our hands. After every task, always wash your hands. Also, you always want to make sure your work area is properly sanitized. Whenever you're using multiple products, make sure you are changing your cutting boards and washing your knives and sanitizing your area. Also, in between use of different items, you always want to remember to wash your hands. When you're done with all of your tasks, wipe, clean, and sanitize your area properly and wash your hands. When thawing items, to avoid foodborne illnesses, you always want to thaw something in the refrigerator. Never thaw an item on a countertop or in a water bath. When preparing your food, temperature is very important. Always make sure you have a working thermometer in your kitchen. You want to make sure all of your products are cooked well done. Some great tips are, if it's protein, you want a grayish brown in color. If it's turkey or chicken, you want a nice white color with no pink. With fish, you want nice flakiness. Also, if there's skin on it, the skin should remove very easily. Finally, when it comes to eggs, you want to make sure your yolks and your whites are nice and cooked, or if they're scrambled, you cook them thoroughly. Consuming raw eggs is extremely dangerous for children, so make sure they never eat any batters or doughs that have a raw egg product in them. When it's tasting time, each child has their own tasting utensils. We don't want double dipping or allowing the child to taste something from the spoon that we are actually mixing with. Remember, safety first. Also, always wash your hands. When reheating food, you want to make sure it's heated to the proper doneness. Using a thermometer is very, very important for this. Also, holding your food hot is important. You want to make sure you have the proper items to hold the food hot so temperatures don't drop and bacteria starts to grow in the food. When reheating anything and temping something, you want to make sure you're sanitizing your thermometer and washing your hands.
You want cheese?
When serving your food, you always want to make sure your hot products remain hot and your cold products remain cold. Hot food hot, cold food cold. Remember, going on trips with your program, food safety is important too. Properly storing any perishable goods in coolers with ice packs is very important. Food quality is very important, not only while you're grocery shopping, but also while at your program. If you're unsure of something, or you're not sure if the quality is really there, remember, when in doubt, throw it out.
Some programs have pets. This might be a home-based provider's cat or dog, or perhaps gerbils or a resident bunny in a school-age program. Children will naturally be curious about and want to interact with these animals, so you'll need to consider how to manage that interaction and the care of the animal without jeopardizing the safety of the children. OCFS regulations state that any pet or animal kept indoors or outdoors at the program must present no evidence of disease or parasite and pose no threat. So what does this mean for us?
Well, for me, when you say bunny, it makes me think of allergies. As a small child, I had a huge allergic reaction to a bunny, so I'm highly allergic to them. So I'm very sensitive to that for young children, that if it's an animal that they would have the allergies to, then you end up having a medical emergency on top of it. So that would be important to know about allergies, would be the first place I would start.
Great. Having animals in a program does pose some risks. Concerns like allergies, which you mentioned, germs, bites, or scratches should all be carefully considered and planned for in advance so children can be safe while enjoying their interaction. Now, what else should you think about before any interaction with animals?
A couple of other things that you should think about. Are children afraid of the animals? You also want to think about how is the animal going to be taken care of while you're conducting your duties as a daycare provider. Do they need to be walked? What happens if they have an accident in the home, inside of the house? How are you going to clean that up? All of those things. So you might want to consider having someone else in the home, another household member, be responsible for their food, cleaning up after they eat, cleaning up if they have an accident in the home, and taking them out if they need to walk. Be walked.
Many of us have dogs in our personal lives, and some of you have dogs living in your home, which you were referring to. Let's turn back to certified animal behavioralist Kevin Holohan for some advice on safety managing dogs in your program.
The reason that we have dogs in our lives, there's a lot of personal reasons, and the comfort level and the partnership, the companion animal, and they just provide a level of comfort and companionship that supervision is the #1 key. So dogs shouldn't be just allowed to roam or just be kind of a part of the landscape. You really have to make sure that you have things in place from a supervisory level over the dog. And again, it's a better idea to bring the dog out in intervals, because it's easier to supervise and monitor because of all the things you're expected to do at a daycare. The first thing would be to allow the dog to come up to them. When a lot of kids walk up towards a dog, and it kind of can be overwhelming. Some other things would be is when they stand there, just to kind of keep their hands at their side and let the dog kind of dictate how they're going to approach. Don't be in a rush to pet them. The dog will start to soften its body posture and will tell you that it's more comfortable. So when it comes up and it sniffs at it, it may sniff your hand or sniff your clothes, and then all of a sudden it'll lean into you a little bit, or it'll get closer to you and its tail will start to relax. They're all indicators that the dog is more accepting that it's okay for you to touch it. But sometimes, again, the rush or push to touch it right away can create a problem as well. Supervision is the #1 key. Whether you're walking down the road or you're in a room or whatever the case is, it's an absolute hard and fast rule to not leave a dog alone with any kids ever. You're introducing a dog into a room full of children. Keep in mind, it can be a new experience every time for the dog. So when you add 1 or 2 new kids to the group, the dog has to get used to them as well. So if it's a daycare where you constantly kind of have people coming and going, you want to make sure that, again, that you have that high level of supervision over it. A lot of times, because of previous experience with their family members, it's easy to drop your guard. And by dropping your guard, you say, well, I'll leave the dog alone and they'll be fine. But the problem is when you walk away and you don't have that level of supervision, you don't know what's occurring. So you may have a really great social dog, but with children, because they're curious and inquisitive and they don't always act appropriately, if they come up and they poke the dog, they poke him in the eye, they pinch his ear. If you have a dog that's a little bit older and is sore and they fall on it, there's multiple ways a dog will communicate to you that hurts and they're in pain, but one of the most common is growling or biting. If a dog attacks a child at that point, the very first thing is to separate them, and for health and safety reasons for the child first and foremost. So if you have a dog that gets aggressive, is going after, you have to immediately intervene. This is going to be the decision of putting yourself between the dog and the child to prevent further injury to the child. And then the child's going to be moved, and the dog 100% should be at that point secured elsewhere. Secured meaning a crate or a kennel or something indoor or outdoor, but secured. And then you're going to tend immediately to any medical needs that the child has, you know, any injuries and that kind of thing. But the reality is by the time you hit that point, you're at a bad spot. You're at a really bad spot. You know, something as simple as this, just having the dog on lead can help prevent it. It's a difficult thing because I can imagine as a a daycare provider, when there's 10 or 12 kids in a room and you're moving from spot to spot, this may not be the option. Maybe that's not the time to have the dog loose. You can use the dog, you can bring the dog into the room at different times where that's what you're doing. So in other words, you're introducing the dog to the children and it's very controlled and it's a controlled setting. There are dogs, and I've seen them, where they're just kind of part of the room, part of the furniture, and they're really good natured. But again, you take a dog that's sleeping, and if a child trips and falls on it, when they wake up, it's going to be scared, it's going to be spooked, and that's when you run the risk of an injury. One of the issues you run into with puppies is because of their age and their energy level, and their teeth are like razors. And they like to play and bite and chew for a lot of reasons. Sometimes if their teeth hurt or they're just at the stage where they explore everything with their mouth, that can be a bad mix with any kind of kids. So again, if you're going to introduce a puppy into that, it's a supervisory issue. And it's for short duration, because puppies, along with just like small children, have very short attention spans. So it has to be a controlled encounter with a goal in mind, and you kind of have to just kind of keep an eye on it, because otherwise letting a puppy go in a group of kids is just generically a bad idea. And when you get one puppy that starts getting really excited, they manage to find the one child that's not really comfortable with them, and then before you know it, you have a child crying and the puppy's clawing and climbing all over them, and then now you have kind of like a little bit of panic, which never helps. So, right, you're a little bit bigger than a puppy.
You also need to make the environment safe for the children in your care. You want to know that the spaces children occupy, the air that they breathe, and the water that they drink are safe. That means you need to identify and address any environmental hazards such as radon, pesticides, and lead. OCFS has updated the Environmental Hazards Guidance Sheet with information on common environmental hazards, as well as who to call for assistance. You can find that on page 31 of your handouts. We spoke with Dr. Gary Ginsberg, the director of the Center for Environmental Health of the New York State Department of Health, about dangers posed by radon and other environmental safety hazards such as lead and pesticides. Let's watch.
You know, the big ticket safety items like pool safety or cracks in the sidewalk or getting rid of the ice after a snowstorm, you know, these are very clear things that are obvious for people to be on top of. But some of the more subtle factors, like the drinking water, especially if you're on a private supply, the indoor air quality if you're in an area where there's high radon, and you won't know that until you test. These things are not so obvious, and that's why we're out here trying to promote safe environmental health practices so that the awareness is spread and people are looking at those factors as well.
Get off of our paper.
What most people don't realize is that the second leading cause of lung cancer in the United States is radon. It's an odorless, colorless gas that comes up naturally from bedrock, uranium-containing bedrock, which surprisingly is pretty common in New York State. And being a gas, it can be drawn into a house, especially in colder weather, sort of like water going down a drain, but instead any crack in the foundation or a sump pit, it can pull up soil gas. And radon is a constituent of soil gas. Radon is a radioactive particle that converts from a gas to a particle in your lungs, and it can just sit there and continue to send off these emissions of radioactivity onto lung material, sensitive lung material, that will lead to damage and cancer over the long term. Especially because lungs in young children are rapidly growing, and that growing tissue is very sensitive to things like radiation. So one simple thing that people can often do is just seal up the basement foundation and some pits to keep it from coming into the home to start with. Lead has been recognized now for decades as something that will damage brain development. The most critical period is very young children because lead gets to the brain more easily in the early ages, and it just lodges there in the brain and continues to do damage to brain development and learning. So we know statistically that children that were exposed to higher levels of lead do less well in school, higher dropout rate, even a higher rate of criminality going looking at older ages. So it affects ability to get jobs and earn income. And this is all based upon early life exposures to lead.
Do you want a drink?
Regarding lead levels in drinking water, in tap water, if you are on a public supply that's quote unquote city water, that lead level has been tested. On a private well, you have no idea. And the other problem with lead, even on a public supply, is that water can, if it's sitting in local pipes for a long period of time, it may still leach some amount of lead. If you've got old plumbing, which is basically before the 1980s, when there was still commonly in use lead solder. And so any residences or daycare centers that were, say, built in the 1980s or before should have a program where first draw in the morning, the first water should be flushed so that children, if there was any water sitting in the pipes overnight, especially important if no one was there over the weekend, that Monday morning you just run the water for a minute and any water that was sitting in the pipes. It's just a good general precaution. But it is also important to know the lead level in your water, especially if you're on a private well. I think one of the most common mistakes with pesticides is that people think that can of bug spray that you can buy in the supermarket shelves. Number one is that it's safe for young children to be around, and number two, that it's effective. You know, you really want to get, say, ants at the nest. And a bug spray, you may feel like you're powerful, that you can kill a few ants that you see crawling across the counter, but that doesn't really get at the problem very effectively. And surprisingly, studies have shown that the pesticide does not stay where you point and shoot it, but it ends up getting into the air and falling onto the carpeting, falling onto plush toys, and children will be the ones that get, not you as the person spraying, but the children in the home and the pets will get the most exposure. And the other is food. You know, pesticides are in non-organic food, and so there is a residue that you can get from eating commercial produce. Usually that is not a real high level of exposure compared to what you can get from the lawn chemicals and from the household sprays that people often engage with, and ends up again with young children and pets getting the lion's share of the exposure. So good advice is don't use a pesticide around the home. You know, if you need to get rid of a wasp nest and you think you can do it yourself, just make sure that it's not near where children are going to be doing any play or spending any time. Our website is a great resource. It's got tons of information on whatever topic you might find or not be aware of. So take a look at the variety of topics. Now, it's really a call to action for you to become more engaged and aware of the various issues and make use of our resources.
CFS has updated its Zone 1 radon locations, and information on which towns are affected is available on the Division of Child Care Services radon page, as you're seeing on your screen. This is also included in the resources section of your handouts. Effective August 1st, 2019, All programs in the new Zone 1 locations must complete radon testing at license renewal. Documentation of radon testing must be on file and submitted to OCFS. Be sure to contact your regulator with any questions. A link for the New York State Department of Health's Reduced Cost Radon Test Kit is also included in the resources section of the handouts. Regulations require adequate and safe water supply and sewage facilities must be provided and must comply with state and local laws. Hot and cold running water must be available and accessible at all times. If your program treats landscaping with pesticides, regulations require that you must send a notice home with each child or otherwise provide notification to the parent of each child not less than 48 hours prior to the application of pesticides. So what do we need to think about if we're using pesticides?
Just what you said. Make sure that you notify parents ahead of time. That's very, very important because children have allergies. We want to make sure that the pesticide is not going to be detrimental to the children.
Great. We have shared a lot of important information and resources today, and we want to wrap up with some final thoughts from some of you on keeping children safe.
I really think the biggest advice or takeaway I would think of is letting kids know why you expect them to do something. So I think it's really important to say, like, if you do X, Y might happen. This is why we don't do it. Here's what we can do instead.
I think it's very important to make sure that the children are being safe at all times.
Just making sure you're actually watching the kids is really, really important.
Children's minds are so moldable, so it is so important for you to be enthusiastic about children's safety, teach them how important it is, but in fun ways.
I will do best what I can do for these kids and thinking about safety and thinking about all what I can do for them.
I would think that people should be aware that kids may not always know that they're not being safe.
So for me is to make sure that everything around them is okay.
Remember, children are growing and developing every day. What might be safe today might not be safe tomorrow.
We are now out of time. Your questions are important to us. If we were unable to answer yours live, someone will follow up with you. To view more informative videos like the ones you've seen today, visit our Early Childhood Education and Training Program YouTube channel. There you'll find many video resources we've made with your help. Just go to YouTube and search ECETP. Hit the subscribe button on the channel and share with your friends. Tina and Heather, thank you for being here today to share your expertise with us.
Thank you.
We'd also like to thank Kevin Holohan, Melissa Doney, Peter Latanzio, Dr. Gary Ginsberg, Dr. Nathan Graber, and all the programs and organizations featured in today's training. Finally, thank you for your participation. Your ability to think ahead and plan for and address any safety concerns you identify will help you keep the children in your care safe. We've talked about how you can address safety throughout the year and how to involve families in your efforts. You can share this information with staff and examine your own practices and procedures to promote safety year-round. Please stay tuned for the post-test and remember to sign the attestation statement at the end of the test and the roster so you can receive credit for this training. Have a good night.
Question number 1. The emergency plan is required by regulation for A. All child daycare programs, B. Home-based programs only, or C. Center-based programs only. Question number 2. You must check and replenish first aid kits and document this A. Weekly, B. Monthly, or C. Yearly. Question number 3. As of 2019, New York State requires all smoke detectors sold must be A. A unit capable of producing audible tones of 100 meters or more, B. A combination smoke detector carbon monoxide detector unit, or C. Either a 10-year sealed non-removable battery or hardwired detector. Question number 4. Insect repellent is recommended for use A. On all children in the program, B. Only on children over 2 months of age, or C. Not recommended for use on children. Question number 5. Ticks are found A. In every part of New York, B. Primarily in western New York, or C. Primarily in northern New York. Question number 6. Heat-related illnesses include A. Heat anger and heat apathy, B. Heat cramps and heat stroke, or C. Heat sweats and heat hunger. Question number 7. Regulations state if you take children off-site, you must A. Develop and share written plans with staff, B. Pack 1 bottle of sunscreen for all children, or C. Bring enough soda and snacks for everyone. Question number 8. If your program provides transportation, you must have A. A valid New York State learner's permit or New York State driver's license, B. An automobile that was manufactured in 2010 or later, or C. An OCFS-approved plan and parental permissions for each child. Question number 9. Use this technique if you must operate a fire extinguisher to evacuate children. A. Pass, B. Run, or C. Save. Question number 10. An odorless, tasteless, cancer-causing radioactive gas is A. Radon, B. Lead, or C. Aerosol. Question number 1. The emergency plan is required by regulation for A. All child daycare programs, B. Home-based programs only, or C. Center-based programs only. Question number 2. You must check and replenish first aid kits and document this A. Weekly, B. Monthly, or C. Yearly. Question number 3. As of 2019, New York State requires all smoke detectors sold must be A. A unit capable of producing audible tones of 100 meters or more, B. A combination smoke detector carbon monoxide detector unit, or C. Either a 10-year sealed non-removable battery or hardwired detector. Question number 4. Insect repellent is recommended for use A. On all children in the program, B. Only on children over 2 months of age, or C. Not recommended for use on children. Question number 5. Ticks are found A. In every part of New York, B. Primarily in western New York, or C. Primarily in northern New York. Question number 6. Heat-related illnesses include A, heat anger and heat apathy, B, heat cramps and heat stroke, or C, heat sweats and heat hunger. Question number 7. Regulations state if you take children off-site, you must A, develop and share written plans with staff, B, pack 1 bottle of sunscreen for all children, or C, bring enough soda and snacks for everyone. Question number 8. If your program provides transportation, you must have A, a valid New York State Learner's Permit or New York State Driver's License, B, an automobile that was manufactured in 2010 or later, or C, an OCFS-approved plan and parental permissions for each child. Question number 9. Use this technique if you must operate a fire extinguisher to evacuate children. A, pass, B, run, or C, save. Question number 10. An odorless, tasteless, cancer-causing radioactive gas is A, radon, B, lead, or C, aerosol.